right. Hey, everybody. It's Jamie with Lemon Rebellion. I'm here today talking with Taylor Stillwell, and we're going to learn about her story of how she went from adversity to advantage. So, Taylor, welcome. Thanks for being here, for being willing to chat with us. Love the poster in the background, by the way.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, we were just talking a little bit before we were recording, but for the audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and where this story starts.
Well, who I am is I'm a Bay Area transplant. I came out for a visit to San Francisco, fell in love with the person I came to visit, and fell in love with the place, and picked up my life from Texas and moved here. And over the course of that was in the late 90s. Over the course of that, I got married, had a child, got divorced, am co-parenting with my ex-husband, and have been in a relationship with a woman that I'm now married to for the past 16 years.
Congratulations. That's a lot of transition.
Wonderful. It's a lot of transition. So that's the bio of who I am.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about your story, where the audience is interested in hearing these stories of when something rough happens in life that you didn't expect and you're kind of forced into a big pivot, how you create something good from that. So tell us.
Absolutely. So, I think we all have a few, but the one I'm going to focus on today is chasing a career. So the Silicon Valley is full of people that are chasing success, and lots of them get it, as everyone probably knows. We have
famous for that here.
Yeah. So, and it trickles down to, from, the Bill Gates to, down to the bottom people. And the short version is I actually am a marriage and family therapist. And that was my first career. And I quickly got out of that because I worked with people that were mentally ill, chronically and severely mentally ill. And it took a toll emotionally. And from that, it led into a career into the Bay Area startup world, building culture and, helping create cultures for these startups and create a space in them that lets the company allows them to be efficient. And, it's a great hiring tool when there's such a competitive market here. Mm-hmm. So, it's probably one of the few areas of the world where you could say, what is your job? And my job was to make people want to come to work. And that's a really fun job.
Yeah.
And so it really is. It's, and it's learning, what does company A need? And so one of the companies I landed on, and gosh, it's been maybe 7-8 years ago now, was a small startup. I was employee number 12.
Okay.
I was so kind of ground up with this company, and it was really fun. They were in a warehouse type of building that was doing the work, and really a step above a garage.
I feel like that's the origin story of every big tech company in the world. It's like it was somebody's garage, and now it's
we were a step above that. And so, and they had furniture, they had a couple of labs and all of the things. And one of the founders brought me on. I'd worked with him previously in a completely different field, and it was fantastic. And, he and I had worked so well together, and he's like, just build this up. Let's turn this into something amazing and make sure people want to come to work, and you're fun and you're organized. So let's do that together. And so we did. And it was really, really great. And until it wasn't. And so, fast forward, maybe 3 years later, we're at almost 100 employees. We've moved a couple of times.
Quickly,
and it had, some really big growth fast because they're building an amazing product.
Mm-hmm.
Still are. And, as companies evolve, and I think it's just like a family, everybody grows in them and you grow out of it. Mm-hmm. And, it became a place where I don't want to say I wasn't appreciated, because most of the employees just loved the hell out of me. And I would say like almost all of them did. And even, the person I reported to loved me, but it was that relationship where you're taken for granted. And I let it happen. I, at every turn where I could have said, hey, this isn't working for me, or hey, let's try to do it this way. I didn't. I just, smiled and nodded. Mm-hmm. So I really like to acknowledge my part in this. Mm-hmm. So but I found that I was like, well, this isn't working for me. And some things have kind of come down the pipe. I'm like, this just isn't feeling right in my soul. And it's not, it didn't fit my ethical values. And so, I went and said, to a couple of the C-levels and said, hey, here's what's going on. I'd like to meet with you guys next week. I've got a strategic plan for, my department, my position, and what that will look like in 6 months, 3 years, and 5 years, and how that affects everything. And so I'd like to go over it with you because it doesn't match a lot of the things that are happening that are, kind of directives I was being given.
Sure.
And so they're like, great. So, I turn over the plan and they're like, you're asking for a lot of demands. And I'm like, I am, and I should have done it all along, but we're at a great place to do it now. They're like, well, we'll think about it and let you know. I said, that's great. And so a few days went by and I got called into a meeting and there were 2 people. I'm like, hi. And I assume they're telling me, what flew, what didn't.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They're like, well, this is the hard meeting. This is going to be a hard meeting. And I said, oh, okay. And they're like, this is where we part ways. And I was like, so I sat there and I was like, I was like, okay. And I said,
yeah,
not what I expected at all. And so, and then I said, so are you packing up my desk right now? And they're like, well, no, of course not. That's not what we're doing. And I said, okay, gentlemen, how do you want this to go?
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm not a fit, tell me how, what's next? And they said, well, we were hoping you could stay on a week or 2 because no one knows how to do your job and train people. And I'm like, but you are firing me. This is not downsizing. I'm not being let go. They're like, yes, you're absolutely being let go. I'm like, am I being let go or am I being terminated? Like,
yeah. And what is the motive? I'm sure you were dying to know what's the motivation behind this. If it was a result of your plan or what had happened.
Absolutely. But, I had a strong idea. And since it's only a guess, I don't even speculate about it anymore because maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. And so, I was like, well, if you really want me to stay, we need to work out what that looks like. And I'm happy to do that, but it's going to cost you.
There you go.
That's going to cost you. So, from that, and I said, but I can't stay here today. I need to go home. You guys have just fired me. And I'm like, is there a reason? Did I do something, because typically I was also HR, you kind of give people a reason that they did something wrong, or you give them a way to turn it around.
Sure.
Didn't get that. They're like, nope, you're just done. I'm like, okay, I'm just done. So I go home and I'm crying because it's really demoralizing. And so I walk in my door and, my wife and son, who's a teenager at the time, they're like, how was your day? And I was like, I got fired. And they both stood there and this is what I heard. Congratulations, let's go out to celebrate. And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, let's just go out to dinner and talk it over. They're like, have a good cry, then we're gonna go out to dinner and celebrate this. I'm like, why would I got fired? This is not something you celebrate. And they're like, actually it is. They're like, you've been miserable there for a year. They're like, you've been absolutely miserable. And
they saw it and you weren't as aware of it.
I was not, I didn't want to admit it, right? Yeah. And so I just was like, okay, so, I mean, obviously I did not get the enthusiasm that night that they had.
So you're like, oh, you jerks.
I was just like, what is wrong with you people? I live, I was like, I live with savages, but, and, so we go out to dinner and they're ordering like appetizers and desserts and I'm just barely able to not like sob at the Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And so, and all kidding aside, they were really supportive. And I went back to work and finished that week and did what I said I would do. And then one of my, colleagues was on vacation. And when he came back, he said, he goes, we knew your plan that you presented would go one of 2 ways. You would either really, really have a career that would set the tone for the rest of your life. Or maybe this would happen. He goes, none of us thought this was the option. It's like, no, we didn't. And so he said, he goes, you don't know this, but before I joined this company, I was also fired. He goes, I'm going to tell you this. And he gave me the best advice I'd ever heard. And he just said, you will work again. And it was that simple. And he's like, so he goes, take a couple of months to find yourself. And I was like, I know who I am. And I'm like, that's why I was fired. He goes, find yourself, the next version. He goes, when I, was let go, he goes, he didn't live here. He goes, I bought 2 jet skis and learned how to ride a jet ski from Florida to the Bahamas. And
Wow.
and really, right? And I was
like that's the way to go out like that.
and that's what I thought too. And I was like, wow, I don't know what that means. And so, there was a lot of shifting in my family, like, because obviously I'm not bringing in money.
Yeah.
And
there's uncertainty that comes around that. You don't know how long that'll last. And I'm sure.
All of the things. And so, we were like, okay, so how do we really tighten our belts here? How do we live differently as a family? And my son and wife all agreed. They're like, do not go chase another job. Every day do something that gets you looking for another job, but don't chase it, and really come up with what you want. And over the course of the next months, I did take some part-time work, just contract work here and there. Someone would say, could you work these 3 days for me? And I absolutely said yes to all of that, because we all have to eat, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And, the severance I received, I really wanted to save that and not use it, and obviously I used some of it. But in those couple of months of really, I spent time taking walks, going for bike rides, hiking, going for hikes near my house. It was all stuff I did alone, and just kind of sat with who I was in my head. And what I came up with within 2 weeks was kind of, whether it's God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, did for me what I could not do for myself. And I realized the job was, borderline abusive a little bit, definitely toxic. And interestingly, like the weight I had was overweight. The weight started coming off. Wow. Like all of these things. And I was like, the universe did for me what I would have never done, would not have done it for myself. And with that realization, I came to the conclusion that if the universe could take care of me when I was demoralized and broke, where else could I start inviting the universe in? And, and that was the big takeaway for me. And what I also realized was I don't want a Silicon Valley career. I don't want this, it's not that I don't want to be successful. We all do, I think. But I redefined, what does success look like for me?
What were the things that shifted? What was the new definition of success that you were able to discover?
The new definition was that I don't have a desire to do 70-hour work weeks. Not a desire at all. I came to the conclusion that perhaps I'll own a home in the Bay Area one day, or maybe I'll be a renter my whole life, because it's just a very expensive area. And I let go of the kind of the dream of chasing home ownership.
Interesting.
And it's not that it's gone. I just don't know if it'll happen. And I don't have an attachment either way.
Well, it looks like your values shifted. You decided this prepackaged idea of big Silicon Valley job, own a house in the Bay. You kind of let go of that and you shifted towards something else, it sounds like.
I did. I shifted towards, a life that included a lot more time with my family and a lot more sleeping. I love to sleep.
Good for you. It's like the pillar of wellness. Eat well, sleep enough, drink water.
All of the things. And, I was like, I want a life where exercise fits in, and not just like 20 minutes at the gym on the way to work that I didn't love, but I liked my hour or 2-hour hikes. Fitting in just different things that, that allow me to have a life I want. I started gardening, and just growing my own food. Silly little things that I realized that bring me no income.
Yeah, but they're meaningful.
And they're so meaningful. And, and realizing, so what if I got fired? I started asking around. Most people, not all, have been fired. It happens. Fair or not, it just happens. And the big shift was that I didn't identify myself with my job anymore.
Yes.
My job, it needs to pay the bills. And I need to like it. I don't need to love it anymore. And I found that I'm super grateful, and I have a job now where it fits all those criteria, and it just kind of slowly worked its way into my life. One of the contract work I did for a weekend, the person I worked with, he's like, I really like your style. And he was like, you're really organized, and he goes, you know how to keep people on a schedule and on a budget. He goes, you just don't demean anybody.
Mm.
And, and my family might argue that point sometimes.
Oh, family's always a little different.
but it was more that I knew what that felt like.
Yeah.
And I knew that
You
didn't want anyone to feel how I felt. Someone might get fired, and I don't want to keep people from being fired. I don't want to keep people from growing, but I don't think anyone needs to feel, like they're worthless.
Yeah.
Or their value is, every time someone new and better gets hired, they go down a rung on the ladder, and not in success, but in value. And that was, that's now what I bring to the table when at my job. And I actually work for myself. I'm a consultant for startups, and I help them build space and culture. The same thing. I just don't work for these startups. I'm not an employee. Yeah. I go do what I did, and once they're into their new real estate, I'm out.
Yeah, and you have to do it on your terms. So it sounds like you had to let go of this idea of who and how you thought you should show up to embrace something that was a lot more aligned with your values, and start creating, it sounds like, elements of life that were really important to you, like connecting with your family and with nature and movement.
Nature and movement were the biggest changes, and diet. Because, at startups, they provide you breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're usually delicious. They're not necessarily healthy. And so
keeps you working longer hours, so you don't have to leave.
Keeps you working longer hours. Yeah. It's, so I was always connected. My family, they really didn't, their time was never a sacrifice, ever. What went was, eating healthy, exercise, routine, sleep.
Yeah.
But they weren't getting the best of me.
Sure.
They got my time and they got my love, but I didn't have the energy or the physical health. I mean, since I've been fired, I've lost 80 pounds.
Whoa,
so
that's amazing.
Thank you. So I couldn't go kick a soccer ball with my kid, without being winded after 5 minutes. And so, now they get all of that, and nature's been the biggest change. I've, in the past few years, I certainly do a lot more hikes, and I do, I'll go play, instead of like movies and board games, and we still do that some. And my son's grown and out of the house now. He's 20 and living in New York. But I'm like, hey, do you want to go to the beach and play Frisbee? Those kind of things that we're still connecting, but certainly, and it changed like how the whole family's health went.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow.
So, and, now it's like, hey, it's 6 a.m. Who wants to go surf? And I'm quite bad at it. I'm so bad at it. But
you get yourself out there. That's awesome.
And the water's 55 degrees. It's cold.
I hear that. I hear that's good for circulation.
Let's hope.
Keeps you young and active.
And I just think it was when that happened, it would have been so easy for me to just become kind of a bitter, jaded person, because I have to say, by default, that's where I would go. My core is, I would love to say I'm someone who lives in gratitude. That is not who I am. I have to kind of I have to cultivate it daily. Yeah, I have to get up before I leave the bed and go, what can I be grateful for today? And so I feel like that and I'm not sure, I really think it was those words, you will work again. And it wasn't like, this is okay, we've all been through it, you're going to be fine, they shouldn't have done this. It was none of those things that build you up.
Yeah.
It was just the fact, you'll work again, which let me know it's just work.
Yeah.
It's just work.
And you were able to just accept that as that is objective truth. It will happen, and I don't have to be anxious. Oh no, that was my microphone. Sorry.
It's all right.
I imagine that helped you avoid, some of the maybe less productive reactions in the situation, because you just held on to this belief of, I will work again.
before I heard that, I was like, my goal was to apply for 30 jobs a day, to have a job within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think I would have probably just chased the same situation. And I would have, unconsciously looked for another situation that would have set me up in the same place.
Yeah.
Because there wouldn't have been any growth.
Right.
And, I joke that because I love living in San Francisco, I won't work until I'm 95. However, it doesn't feel like a chore anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it was, I think those crinkles where we get so broken, we're almost too kind of, forgive me, but weak to fight. And so the good gets to come in.
I get it. That's when you just start accepting things as they are, and you have to trust, because you realize no matter what you do, you're not going to be able, you just have to go with what comes. Is that how it was in some ways?
That's exactly how it was.
Yeah.
I suppose there's always another choice. But it just, so I've now, since then, I haven't had any of those big kind of boom, none of those sucker punches or get, bats to the knees, but there's been smaller ones, where, oh, by the way, a pandemic hits, the world's going to shut down, and you're not working again, and oh my, and now I just chuckle. I'm like, wow, okay. And instead of saying, oh, this is awful or this is bad, now I just know, I'm like, wow, this is going to get really interesting. I don't know how, but now when the bad things happen, I'm like, this is interesting. And I can't wait to see what Taylor does with this one.
That's awesome, because you believe in yourself. You've seen what you've been capable of going through and come out on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank God they fired me. I really was miserable. And I am, and that stays on the top of my gratitude list, that which also takes away some of, obviously, the anger and bitterness that I'm fired unfairly, right? And I was like, maybe God or whoever, whatever, was coming through that person too, saying, she's not leaving, you've got to fire her. And none of us know what's going on in the bigger picture. And just trust the bigger picture. That's especially awesome. When it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love also the playfulness with which you tell that story, and that you clearly feel free and full of joy in the life you've created now. So that's really awesome. As we wind up, because we're running out of time, but what would be that last little nugget of wisdom that anyone that feels like they've listened to your story, it's resonated for them, maybe it's related to something they're going through, what's that last nugget of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know if it's a nugget of wisdom, but I think it's a kernel of joy. Yes, a kernel of joy. I think it's that whole, just whether it's a job or anything, breathe in, breathe out, repeat as needed. Yeah. Because it is okay, even when it doesn't feel like it. It really is okay, and the universe has your back. Yeah. Awesome, Taylor. Oh my gosh. I'm so pleased to hear your story. Thank you for coming. Thank you. There's a lot of inspiration, I think, in your story, and you've got great energy too. So thank you for being here and for sharing with us. Thanks, Jamie. It was actually a big pleasure. The high of my day. Oh, sure. You're wonderful. For me too. Really lovely talking with you. Thank you. You too. Thanks. Bye. Bye.